Hello, it's Jill Whalen out at the Hopkinton State Park on a gorgeous, sunny, warm day. Finally getting to do my stand-up paddleboarding. The weather's been pretty iffy around here lately. So this is my second video today because I did a live, my first live, Facebook Live in my Victim of Thought group, which you're welcome to join. It's for people who've read my book, but even if you haven't read it or plan to read it, you can join it. Today I wanted to talk about, I recently had an experience of, I'm doing this thing the wrong way, facing up, oh well. I recently had the experience of having like some poison ivy, or I don't think it was poison ivy, but it was poison something, which I get just by like being anywhere in the vicinity of it. And it occurred to me while I was having it. I had all kinds of thoughts going on during it because it got bad at times. But it reminded me a little bit of thought, or of angry thought, really, when it comes down to it. That the compulsion to scratch, like, you know, it's when you have some kind of itch and you just feel, you know, you just like have to scratch it, and yet scratching's like the worst thing you can do for it. We get a helicopter or something overhead. It reminded me of thought. Like, that's what thought is like when we're in like especially like say an angry thought. If we're full of anger about something, like we so want to act during that time, like lash out at somebody or at something, talk about it more, stuff like that, and yet that's like the worst thing we can do if when we're in that state, which is kind of funny. If we instead, you know, can let it pass or realize it's just our thinking or whatever might happen, like, it's a lot better for us, because we tend to get ourselves in trouble. And it was the same with that itchiness for me. Like, I could try through willpower to not scratch and not touch it, but, you know, at some point like that, the compulsion would be too great, and I'd scratch it, and it would feel so good while I did it, just like when you're angry and you lash out at someone, and it feels so good when you're doing it. But it just makes it worse. and that's what it was doing to my itchy rash. The more I would scratch it, the worse it would get, and the itchier it would get. And it's the same with anger. You know, if the angrier you get, you keep on feeding it and lashing out, the worse it gets. Now, that said, what do you do? Because for me, with the rash, there's only so much willpower I could have. And it's the same with thought. You know, when we're in the middle of it, we don't really have the willpower to stop or to not lash out sometimes. So what I found with my rash was, if I'd see like some new ones popping up, because that's how it would happen. Like, all of a sudden there'd be some like two little new dots of itchiness somewhere on me, and they were itchy, but it wasn't like the big rash that I had already scratched to death. And I found that if I scratched those little ones, they would turn into big ones. Just like, you know, if you feed that anger, it turns into big anger. But if I could just resist when I saw them first popping up and not touch them, which was a little bit easier to do than the big rash, then they would go away on their own in a day or two. And it's the same with anger, or even anxiety, or any of the feelings that we get. If we can kind of catch it at the beginning, and not, it's a little bit easier to just not engage in it. And it's so much the same. I mean, I could see the similarities. And so with anger or anxiety or depression or anything like that, probably even like compulsive obsessive disorder, if you can catch it, that's where it comes back to, as I said in my book, the main thing to be able to do is to be aware, being aware of what's going on in our minds, because that's where we get dragged along and become a victim. And that's how I was my whole life. When I wasn't aware of my thoughts, so I wouldn't know I was getting anxious or angry or sad or anything like that. I didn't know it. Like, it just would hit me. And I didn't know that it came from thought first, thought in the moment. And when now that I'm aware, I became aware of my mind just through observing it. And now I can catch these things earlier. So if I find myself getting angry and I catch it and don't scratch it, then it can often go away on its own, just like the rash. The other thing with the poison, whatever it was, I kept having this thinking that, okay, first I thought, all right, I know this stuff, it goes away in, 10 days or so. And in 10 days, it wasn't gone yet. And more were popping up. And so I was getting anxious about that too. What is it? Is it something else? Is it never going to go away? It literally felt like it was never going to go away. And it was the longest 10 days at that point in my life. But I tried not to listen to that thinking, and knew, at least probably by 2 weeks or so, it would go away. And I just kind of held on to that thought instead, because you can make up so many ideas in your head. I started to make up all kinds of things that maybe this, because I didn't know how I got this poison, whatever it was. I have no idea how I got it. I wasn't frolicking in the woods or anything. And so I was starting to make up all these things about it, that it was something I was going to have the rest of my life. But I didn't let myself feed into that. And sure enough, by 2 weeks, maybe a couple extra days, finally, it seemed to be over, out of my system. New ones stopped popping up. And I'm happy to say I'm mostly itch-free today. And I just thought that was a cool analogy and wanted to share it with you. So I'm not going to bump into anything today. There's no wind. You can hopefully hear me. And I will catch you next time.